Welcome back to our series on how to document your lighting designs. We've been talking about lighting plans and what goes on them. In this video, we're going to focus on the controls. And your controls are mostly going to be switches. So when you design your controls, you need to kind of think about all the tasks that are going to be completed in a room and kind of the sequence of activities throughout that room. So typically you want to place switches next to a door, and you want to place them on the latch side of a door. Let's take a look at the example here. Here's the hinge side, here's the latch side. So as you walk into this room, you would reach for the light switch at the latch side of the door. All right. Place switches at both or all, if there's more than two, entrances into a room. All right. Your clients, your users shouldn't have to walk into a dark room and kind of fumble around and look for a light switch or have to backtrack to a different location to turn the light on and off. So here's basically what a switch is going to look like on a plan. All right. It's got a symbol and it connects to the luminaires that it controls. What does that symbol look like? It typically looks like an S with a line through it, or some people use a dollar sign. All right. And then there's a little tag that defines what type of switch it is. So here's your standard single pole switch. That's just your typical one switch. All right. You can have a three-way switch. You can have a dimmer switch. And really, any of these different types of controls, you indicate that with this tag. All right. You can also kind of layer these tags, and I put this example over here of a three-way dimmer. Here's just another source of information for some of these standard switching symbols. You can see that the basic switch is very, very standard. We always use this one. Three-way, four-way, dimmer. Some people use a D, some people use a DM. Up to you. All right. Key operated, weatherproof, time switch. There's many different types of switches. Now, very often you have multiple switches ganged together. They're located in the same place, the same junction box on the wall. There's two different ways to indicate this on the plans. And the first is just to put two symbols right next to each other, or three, or four, or multiple. All right. The second is to use one S symbol, but add lines for each separate switch. Right. It's more common to see the multiple symbols than the multiple lines. So that's what I want you to use for your projects in this class. So we've talked about switches in plan. Let's talk about them in elevation. They're typically placed about 42 to 48 inches above the finished floor, and that's measured to the center line of the switch. In a residential project, you have a little bit of leeway with this, all right, and you can tailor it to your client if you so desire. You also want to aim for roughly 2.5 inches, all right, between the door trim and the light switch cover plate. All right, so think about those pieces that are placed very last in construction, way early in your design process. So here's what you want it to look like on the left, and in the middle is what you don't want it to look like. So pay attention to this. Often what needs to happen during construction is that some spacers will be added to the framing in order to correctly locate your junction box. If your project is commercial or multifamily, you need to provide accessible switches. All right. Accessible switches have to be served by a clear floor space for a forward or a side approach, and they have to be located within an accessible reach range. So let's talk about that first one, the clear floor space. On the left here, we have an example of the forward reach for clear floor space, all right, to reach a light switch. All right, on the right, we have a parallel reach, side reach. All right, you see that the clear floor space is the same, right? It's 30 inches by 48 inches, but it's actually unusual in a residence, at least, to have that long of a clear floor space with no furniture. All right, so your multifamily residences, you want to definitely plan for the forward reach. Your commercial, that's obviously going to depend on your design. Now let's talk about that second bit, the accessible reach range. That's going to be from 15 to 48 inches above the finished floor. And again, we're measuring to the center line of the controls. All right. So you can see that illustrated here. Using the forward reach range, someone can reach from 15 inches off the floor to 48 inches. It gets a little more complicated when someone has to reach over an obstacle. And this commonly happens in kitchens where you have to reach over a countertop. There's a couple of different situations that happen here. One is that there's knee space, all right? And this might be, for example, at a sink location in a kitchen or a bathroom. And if you have to reach over less than 20 inches, all right, so this dimension right here is somewhere between 0 and 20 inches, then it's okay to have the switch as high as 48 inches. All right, so that's the same as the last slide we just saw. But anywhere between 20 to 25 inches, all right, so if your counter is a little bit deeper, and this is your typical kitchen counter, all right, you have to bring that switch down a little bit. And so you've got a 44-inch maximum height. Sometimes there's no knee space. All right, again, a kitchen counter is a good example here. And so someone's going to need to use their side reach. All right, it's important that this is 24 inches maximum. All right, make sure that it's not 24 and a half, not 25, 24 inches maximum, and you can have that switch all the way up to 46 inches if you so desire. All right. So when we talked about luminaires, each individual luminaire needed dimensions. Switches are a little bit different. They're not often dimensioned in your lighting plans. Instead, you can place a typical detail or a note that gives a standard location. And then any switch that doesn't follow that specific standard would be noted specifically on the plan, and that's kind of unusual. So here's one way to do it. This is the typical detail way, and it's usually used for commercial projects. And it might be included on an entire sheet of accessibility notes and details like this. And you can see right here, sorry, I don't have a better image of this, but the light switch is going to be one of these items that has a typical or standard location. Here's the other way to do it, which is to add a typical note. It gives a standard location. Again, any switch that doesn't follow this standard would be noted specifically on the plan, but that's unusual. What's more common is to have multiple heights or different heights for the electrical outlets. And so you'd note that on your plan here. And so that note reads, all switches and receptacles are mounted at 48 inches on center above the finished floor unless otherwise noted. All right, and this is what I want you to use for this class to add that kind of note. All right. All right, in this video, we talked about switches, how to draw them on a plan, how to locate them on a plan, and also how to make them accessible for all of your users. Thanks, everyone.